Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this very special virtual event to mark the 25th anniversary of the signing of the historic Belfast Good Friday Agreement. I am honoured to be your host today as we gather virtually to reflect on the significance of this historic agreement and to explore together the many opportunities it presents for our shared future across our island of Ireland. For those of us who are old enough to remember 25 years ago and how life then compares to life now on our island, we know only too well the incredible economic and societal progress that has been made, however imperfect at times, over that period. For many others listening today, they may only have known a prosperous and peaceful island, and what a privilege. Today, well, I'm delighted to be joined by not just the architects, but the custodians of this historic agreement. Former Taoiseach Bertie Ahern, British Ambassador to Ireland Paul Johnson, and the Irish Ambassador to the UK Martin Fraser. Together, over the next 40 minutes or so, we will dial the clock back to that time 25 years ago when the impossible happened and the deal was actually signed. In doing so, I hope we all get a sense of why this agreement was so historic and precious, along with how it underpins the prosperity that this island has enjoyed in the years after that. We'll also look ahead at the opportunities still to be grasped and the pivotal role that the business community has played and has still yet to play in the transformation of our island. I'm honoured that our first guest joining us this morning is former Taoiseach and one of the chief architects of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, Bertie Ahern. Good morning and thank you for being with us. We're actually delighted to have this opportunity to get a first-hand account of those weeks leading up to the agreement and what was involved in making such a complex deal happen. Bertie Ahern, please do take us back to that period of the conflict and leading up to the signing of the agreement. I think it's fair to say that the odds were really stacked against the negotiating parties actually getting the deal done. What were the biggest challenges at that time and how did you overcome them?
Well, I suppose we started negotiations in real terms in '97, but I suppose you have to go back to the start of the 90s because 91, 92, there were all-party talks. And it wasn't that they resolved anything, but uniquely in Northern Ireland, it was the first time where people set out what they wanted rather than what they didn't want to. So 91, 92 led into what was Albert Reynolds' period with John Major, the Downing Street Declaration, December 93. It was a class document. Everyone had a part in it. It's quite a short document. People Google it and see how short it is. But it was an attempt to say, if you had peaceful means, what it was that people wanted, what were the differences, what way could you actually set out their aspirations and objectives. And that's what the Downing Street Declaration was. That led to the ceasefires, directly led to ceasefires in August 94. And then we moved into 95, when Tony Blair and I, both of us were leaders of the opposition at that time, like 7 years ago. So we started working, if we were in government, what would we do? What we decided in 97 was if they signed up to the Mitchell Principles, that was George Mitchell, famous George Mitchell, who was a majority leader. Many of your people will have known him well in his capacity in Capitol Hill. He was a superb guy. He decided to give up politics. He was from Maine. He was a senator from Maine. And he said to Bill Clinton when he was going, Bill Clinton was very upset that he was leaving Capitol Hill because he was really a good guy at making Capitol Hill work. Clinton said, well, if I ever need you, will you help me? So Clinton asked him, would he help for 3 months? And he ended up spending 3 years with us. But we got into the talks in that September 97, and we got all parties to finally to agree to talk.
It's quite incredible, and you've touched on so many other amazing leaders like Senator George Mitchell, Tony Blair, ex-US President Bill Clinton. Would you mind telling me a little bit about the importance of having the US the UK, Ireland and Northern Ireland pivotal to those talks?
Yeah, it was pivotal because, in my view, in most conflicts, if you don't have external help, it's very difficult, because otherwise everyone is talking at each other rather than with each other, and this is the difficulty. So we were lucky that the United States, took it so serious. Tip O'Neill, Ted Kennedy, Chris Dodd, Moynihan, famous Irish American politicians, all of them well known through the generations in America, but they kept at it. So finally, we got a U.S. president who took a different view. A lot of that, I should quickly add, just so somebody will say in America, why did that happen? Well, this is the reason it happened. Jean Kennedy Smith, John F's sister, was the ambassador in Dublin. She knew the game, and she was in the era of Bill. All politics is local, and all problems are about personalities, and so that's how the history of it came around. George Mitchell's involvement was crucial. Jean Kennedy Smith's role was crucial. America had a huge part to play in it, and Tony Blair's election was a godsend.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating. I can still remember so much of the media clips that I was sitting there as a younger person watching and learning throughout that period of time. And we've touched on some of the really important political figures, but the media at the time was also extensively covering the involvement of civil society groups, and particularly the women's group and their peace process, and eventually towards the signing of the agreement. Can you talk about how influential was the involvement of such groups from a negotiating party perspective?
Well, civil society in the North, from the time of the civil rights movement, and sometimes people forget what started the Troubles. I mean, the Troubles started really on civil rights issues, and it was Northern Ireland really looking for, based on what was happening in the United States and what was happening in France in the late 60s. So it wasn't to do with Irishness or the border or, Britishness or any of those issues. It was a civil right, looking for equality, parity of esteem, for housing, education, for free vote, one person, one vote. Civil society at several times tried to get people to go the peaceful road, and they would get great momentum, and then it would die again. It was a businessman, it was George Quigley, who did great work, because he started the concept of the island economy. That was followed through by trade unionists and the Congress of Trade Unions, by business groups, Chamber of Commerce's, and that was quite effectively. Out of that grew, parents and the women's group. The women's group, funny enough, the former women's group only set up about 6 weeks before the election. They were there ad hoc in various groups, but they only came together because Monica McWilliams, one of the leaders from Derry, and now one of the great human rights people around the world. She's in Somalia at the moment. She's been fighting women's rights all over the world. But they saw the opportunity that rather than just be fringe players, under the rules, they could form a coalition. And they had people from loyalists, unionists, nationalists, Republican backgrounds. So they formed a party in 6 weeks and got elected. But they were a huge help. But civil society, I think in any conflict, I've been involved in different conflicts, different countries, in the Basque Country, Papua New Guinea and elsewhere. But civil society is always very important. And women's groups are really successful at taking on these challenges, because they can pull people together, they can pull extended families together, and they can mobilise civic society probably better than men.
Yeah, it's fascinating actually, isn't it? It just shows you the effort from so many on our island and off our island to try and make sure that we got to that Good Friday.
Yeah, well, I think it's because like 3,700 people were killed, almost 30,000 seriously injured. A recent visit to Boston, a historian professor pointed out to me that in American terms, that's 700,000 people. So that's 4 times Vietnam. So Northern Ireland, with the numbers don't sound, when you take against the population, it was massive. So somewhere along the way, you had to try and get a semblance, It's not perfect what we've done, but at least get a semblance of sanity. And I think a lot of people played a big role in that. And I always take my hand off to them all. I mean, I'm lucky enough to be working with them for years, and I've lived for another 25 years to work with them over that period. But they're very brave people. Anyone who stands up against terrorism and risk. I was talking to a lady the other day. There's an organisation in Northern Ireland which is a very special organisation, WAVE, that represent the victims of people who were killed. And I always feel sad because when you meet that group, you say, why couldn't we have solved this 10 years earlier?
Yeah, some people are just amazing, really, aren't they? And I'm so glad
they're resilient,
incredibly resilient. And I'm very thankful that you brought up the human element to this, because that's exactly what we should remember as well. 25 years on. I want to just maybe bring us in a slightly different direction, if that's okay. Very respectfully, just remembering those previous comments. When you look back 25 years on, and I've been very privileged to hear an awful lot of what you've said and your commentary over that period of time. I'd be fascinated to know, for all of our clients that are listening from Ireland, the UK, Europe, and also the US, as a leader, when you reflect back, I'm just wondering, what are you most proud of around the agreement, but also what would you have done slightly differently either before or after? Well,
I suppose it's a point we're talking about. The thing that makes you proud is that you just stop people being killed. But the agreement, what Tony Blair and I decided, and we got everyone else to buy into it, so we couldn't have done it on our own. I mean, in fact, in some ways, you couldn't have done anything without all of the others. So our plan was to make it inclusive and comprehensive. Get as many parties. There were 10 parties, 2 governments, so 2 parties walked out, so we had 10 groups really involved. And then the other thing was comprehensive. Tony and I decided that the best way, we'd one shot at this, and the best way of taking your shot, and I strongly believe this about every problem, is to make it as comprehensive as possible. So we included all the issues. We threw in the kitchen sink. You were trying to take all the issues. Now, some of them we sorted on the day. Others went through commissions that were worked through, like the Chris Patton of Hong Kong fame. He chaired the policing board. Former Tory minister, great man. The United States gave us Commissioner O'Toole. She was the Boston head of police. Went on to help us in Republic of Ireland on policing. Maurice Hayes, who was a businessman, lecturer, journalist. So we kind of pulled in as many people as we could. But I think it was the comprehensive nature that, and it wasn't a bit for everybody in the audience, but it was to try to deal with what were the fundamental things that were causing the conflict down the years. I think we got a lot of things right, and I think we got more or less the things that allowed business in the north to grow. Because in the end of the day, the solution going forward is business activity, jobs, investment. And now in the new arrangement, I'm sure you want to talk about, but the new arrangement, Northern Ireland, is in a unique, fascinating period. And hopefully over these weeks of the Good Friday Agreement and the anniversary, we might be able to convince people how good it is.
What opportunity do you think we can grasp now over the next 2 weeks as we move forward to really acknowledging 25 years later?
Well, the business opportunity is huge. I should say Northern Ireland is doing far better. You've had the Games of Thrones. Tourism is massive, and the Game of Thrones has been massively successful for tourism. I mean, their figures are exponentially huge. And of course, tourism is done on an all-island basis now. But Northern Ireland is in this position now, that it has the island economy, and the island economy, thankfully, this island now, north and south, is a big economy, and we're doing well. Have problems, but we're doing very well. It has the internal United Kingdom economy, post-Brexit. And it has the new Windsor agreement with the European Union, which brings them into the European Union. So they have the unique position as the only place in Europe that has these benefits. Nowhere else has them. everyone else would like them. I mean, Scotland, Wales, and God knows half the world would like these benefits. So they're in an extraordinarily good place with the backing of America. With President Biden comes, and President Clinton will be here, and so many other American people. Joe Kennedy, again from the Kennedy family, is the special envoy for business, particularly in business. They promised another investment conference. So Northern Ireland, which is doing well in artificial intelligence, it's building up slowly. But this is a glory opportunity for. The only thing I have to quickly add, that it's not good enough just to bring investment to Northern Ireland. I think we need to focus it, and I know that Joe Kennedy understands this well. We need to focus into the areas of potential conflict down the road. We have to help those areas that have been deprived. And I always like that that line. It's the first people that were ever on the island of Ireland is 12,500 years ago. We've only had conflict for 100 years, so there's still hope.
It's so well said, and I've heard you say before so well, and I've heard Taoiseachs such as Micheál Martin and current Taoiseach Leo Varadkar say the same thing, and that a strong Northern Ireland is a strong island of Ireland from an economic and a social perspective, and I think those things are so important for our business here as we look across foreign direct investment, and also our entrepreneurs who are really the lifeblood of our economy.
Yeah, and I think, Northern Ireland have, University of Ulster, you have Queen's, which I'm very involved in, and, they have, Joe Biden will be going to University of Ulster in a week. Bill Clinton will be going the following week to Queen's. So, Northern Ireland University are really good. And one of the tragedies of the Troubles was that, probably 60% of the graduates, young graduates, left. And not alone that, but they left even before they went to university, and they never came back. So, I mean, one of the things we're beginning to turn the tide on now is that they're staying. The cost base in Northern Ireland is far lower than either anywhere else, either Britain, the rest of the United Kingdom, or most of anywhere in Europe. And if the graduates stay home and stay in college, there will be a far better supply. And west of the Ban, I have to also put in a plug for my friends in Derry. But west of the Ban, I mean, there are glorious opportunities in the city of Derry. It's a beautiful city. And, it's where a lot of the trouble started. But there is a unity of all sides there for investment and for business. And a lot of office space that's available. So if I don't say that, I won't be welcome to Derry.
Well, I completely agree with you, and we're lucky enough in EY to support the John and Pat Hume Foundation for the Peace Concert that they will run on the 18th of April. So we're really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be a big night.
It's going to be a big night in Derry, and a really important one. You've also mentioned, there's a few things here. I'm going to read out a quote. It's great that you mentioned so many influencers like the Kennedys, but I'm going to give a quote from John F. Kennedy where he said, "Change is the law of life, and those who only look to the past or present are certain to miss the future." So Bertie Ahern, I want to ask you, what one piece of advice would you have for our business leaders that are watching today who might be grappling with that feeling of, change is really difficult and there's an insurmountable opposition to change? What advice would you give them to keep going?
Well, I've always held the view that there's no such thing as the status quo. If you and I were to stand here eventually late tonight, we'd fall either forwards or backwards. That's the way it is. So you always have to be moving. And if you're a sensible, intelligent person like all your business colleagues, then you want to be moving forward. And I think that always means, planning, looking around the corner, the best qualitative research you can get, best advice you can get. And, I think in the business cycle, it's like the politics cycle, like any other cycle, sports cycle, you must be planning. And I always think the investment in brain power and planning is more important than anything else. And Sometimes I get frustrated with those people who want to pull back, as your quote from John F. is. There is no future. You can commemorate, you can celebrate, you can remember the past, but getting tied up in the past is a useless exercise because tomorrow does come, and you have to be always going ahead.
Yeah, absolutely right. And very shortly we will also invite the British Ambassador to Ireland, Paul Johnson, and the Irish Ambassador to the UK, Martin Fraser, to join our webinar and talk a lot about the future around the societal and, most importantly, the economic opportunity on the foundation of the GFA 25 years on. But can I ask you one last question, especially to our audience of business leaders and our own people here within EY? What is your greatest hope for the future of the island of Ireland?
Yeah, well, I would love to see the institutions of the Good Friday Agreement work properly. And they are the Assembly in the North, the Executive, which is effectively their government, the North-South bodies, I think and the East-West bodies. And both your ambassadors I know very well, worked with Martin for years, I know Paul very well, good Scott. And I think, they're part of this, of driving people forward. But I think what we need to do on this island, there's so many things where we can cooperate and work together on, and so many areas where it makes sense for us to work. It makes sense. We're a small island, and okay, we're 7 million, probably building to 8 million by the end of this decade. But that's still very small. So sharing wisdom, sharing resources and working together makes eminent sense. And what I'd just like to see is that all the boring things of everyday administration, like running the educational service, running the health service, running the environmental services, planning for the future, that's what the politicians in the North should be focusing on. I remember George Mitchell, he said to me, the great thing is he would love to be able to sit down and listen to Stormont having rows about third level education and rows about roads and not, always going on about, what happened 20 years, 30 years. I'm not saying it's not important from history, but it's futile in terms of making life better. And I just want to see this island being a better place. And it can be a great place with great opportunities, great people, great opportunities, doing well, but we can do so much better. And Northern Ireland, unfortunately, it's no good saying it otherwise, lost an entire generation and probably 2 generations. And they have an opportunity now to make that time up over the next 10, 20 years.
That's such a wonderful summary about building a better Ireland, building a better working Ireland, building a better working world. And it's very purposeful to us in EY. Bertie Ahern, I'd really like to thank you sincerely for all that you've done for Ireland in government and subsequently. Thank you for sharing those fascinating reflections and your insight with us. Also, I want to say again a sincere and heartfelt thanks to you personally, along with the Irish, British and US governments, as well as the very brave Northern Ireland politicians of that time, for doing the incredible hard work and getting the job done. We owe a debt of gratitude to all of you. Bertie Ahern, thank you, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Wish you well.
Thank you.
Well, it was so valuable to look back in detail at that time, leading up to the signing of the agreement. So now let's look forward. I'm delighted to be joined by the British Ambassador to Ireland, Paul Johnson, and the Irish Ambassador to the UK, Martin Fraser, to discuss the enduring legacy of economic and social prosperity, along with their insights on the opportunities that lie ahead for this island and for both economies, North and South. Welcome, Ambassadors Johnson and Fraser. It is a real honour for us to have you with us here in EY today. So I might just start, and Ambassador Johnson, I'll come to you first. I'd really like to start by asking you, do you actually remember what you were doing and where you were when the Belfast Good Friday Agreement was signed 25 years ago, and how did that feel?
The funny thing is, I didn't actually remember, but I looked back at my diary for 1998 last night, And I was in Germany on the day of the Good Friday Agreement. I was working in the embassy in Paris at the time, and one of the things I covered was the Northern Ireland peace process. So the diary entry for the following Tuesday, the first day back in the office, was all about briefing French officials and French ministers on the significance of the Good Friday Agreement, writing a telegram back to London about reaction to it. And the first TV interview I ever did was for a French regional TV station about the Good Friday Agreement. So I have very happy memories of it. And I remember just thinking, this is the start of a new chapter. You know, all my life growing up, I was born in 1968. So all my life growing up, what I'd thought about Ireland and Northern Ireland had largely been through the prism of the Troubles. So the sense that something could be finally coming to the end and something new could be starting was something that filled me with a great deal of excitement at the time.
And Ambassador Fraser, in your previous roles as well, you've been heavily involved in the peace process and regarding North and South. Would you mind just giving us some insight into what that has been like over the past while?
Sure. Well, I've just got a lot younger than Ambassador Johnson, because I was born in 1969. 1969 was very much the start of the Troubles, and anyone growing up in Ireland really remembers those times. And I was thinking back, Frank, to 1998, the last few weeks, where we've done a good few events in London, and there'll be more events in Northern Ireland soon to commemorate the anniversary. But one particularly poignant event was in Warrington a couple of weeks ago. It was the 30th anniversary of the Warrington bomb. And John Major was there, former Prime Minister, who was Prime Minister at the time of the bombing. And that bombing saw the murder of a 3-year-old boy and a 12-year-old boy who were out shopping on the day before Mother's Day. And John Major was explaining how hard it was for him to keep working on the peace process at that time. And, you know, that in itself is a terrible atrocity, but it actually wasn't particularly unusual. That's how bad things were in 1993. And no one would have believed then that there would have been a ceasefire in 94. The ceasefire, it broke down, sadly, between 94 and 98. But from 1998 onwards, we saw great progress. We saw the Good Friday Agreement come into fruition in April 1998, 25 years ago. Unfortunately, the Omagh bombing, and there were some other atrocities. But by and large, since then, we've had peace in Northern Ireland, and we've had a huge upsurge in prosperity on the island of Ireland as well. My own part of this, I've worked, I suppose, on the peace process on British-Irish relations on Northern Ireland for about 20 years. I joined the Department of the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister's Office in Ireland, in 1999. Bertie Ahern, who you've been talking to, was the Taoiseach. Tony Blair was still the Prime Minister at that point, and the work of implementation of the agreement was ongoing from 1998 onwards. For my own part, around 2004, 2005, I became more closely involved, and that was a period when we still had to work through the implementation. Saw the end of the IRA armed campaign, the decommissioning of weapons, ultimately the agreement between Gerry Adams, Martin McGuinness and Ian Paisley, which, if you like, cemented power sharing across the full political spectrum in Northern Ireland, the devolution of policing and justice, which was very, very important, and involved Sinn Féin recognising the reformed police service of Northern Ireland, which in itself is one of the great outcomes of the Good Friday Agreement. So going forward then, we had a wonderful occasion in 2011 when Her Majesty the Queen came on the state visit to Ireland, and then that was just reciprocated in 2014 when President Higgins went to UK. In both cases, the first such state visits since independence here. And it was really, we did a lot of hard work, but I think sometimes, you know, in the day-to-day, we see all the concerns we have. We have a difficult bit of politics in Northern Ireland just at the moment, and Brexit has been difficult as well. And myself and Paul have worked very hard to bring people together through that difficult period for Britain, more so than Ireland, I suppose. But I think if we take the long view, we can see, going back to 1998, if we go back to 93 or 83 or 73, really how far we've come on the island of Ireland and how far we've come with British-Irish relations. So it's been overwhelmingly positive, but of course there are always problems. There always will be. You have to work your way through them.
I think that's a terrific summary, Ambassador Fraser. Thank you. And if I move back to you, Ambassador Johnson, 25 years on from the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, what are your reflections on the greatest and most enduring elements of that legacy?
I think a lot of it is what Martin has said, that we didn't put a definitive stop to all the violence, as we've seen with tragic incidents in recent months, but we moved from a time when violence was used systematically in the communities to achieve political goals to a period where it was almost entirely exclusively by political means that people sought to chart their future. And I think that was a seismic shift. And the restoration of or the creation of a type of normal politics in Northern Ireland, and the fact that two governments and the international community came in behind that, and that we've seen such, prosperity and potential opening up for Northern Ireland. And we hope that the recently agreed Windsor framework between the UK and the European Union will cement that tremendous opportunity Northern Ireland has in terms of its relationships with the rest of these islands, with the European Union, with the international community. So I think it's been that sense of moving from a period of violence and uncertainty and instability into something where we've built the foundations for longer term prosperity. There's still a lot of work to be done. The power sharing executive, as Martin alludes to, isn't up and running at the moment, but we have the conditions, the pieces in play that will allow the people of Northern Ireland and the people of all these islands to achieve what should be, I'm sure, their shared goal of peace and prosperity.
Yeah, I think it's really well said. And if we kind of move through, the kind of thinking through the social, but also the economic benefits of the GFA, Ambassador Fraser, would you share your thoughts to our business leaders around, based on the GFA itself? Can you talk to us about the opportunities you see from a societal, but also from an economic perspective? Sure. Well, I mean, the first thing is the societal benefits have been huge. That there, of course, reconciliation, particularly in Northern Ireland, is a work in progress. But the situation on the ground is transformed. The cities, towns, villages and farms of Northern Ireland and the island of Ireland have been completely transformed by peace and prosperity over the last 25 years. I think the economic story is really important, Frank, and I think it's maybe underestimated just how successful that has been. So if you think about the south of Ireland, the Republic of Ireland in 1998, I think we had maybe just over 1 million people employed. Now we've 2.5 million. The population has increased hugely. Our GDP per capita is 4 times higher today, 25 years on, than it was in 1998. And 1998 wasn't a bad economic time in the south. We'd move on quite a lot. So these are huge economic leaps forward. And of course, they are linked to the Good Friday Agreement, to peace and prosperity. They're linked to the help we've received from and Paul has alluded to it, from international partners, not just Canada and Australia and New Zealand and Finland, who helped with the peace process, but the European Union, and particularly the United States of America. Business in the States and the political leadership of the States have been so important. And that has really created a wonderful sort of environment for doing business in Ireland, north and south. And you can see that on the streets of Northern Ireland. I've given you statistics about the Republic of Ireland. I think do the eye test as a business person, do the eye test in Northern Ireland. Look at Belfast, look at the buildings, look at the young people, go to Queen's University, University of Ulster, and look at the talent and the skills and the atmosphere and the environment in Belfast or in Derry or anywhere in Northern Ireland or anywhere in the island, and you see the huge achievements, first of all, and secondly then the huge potential that's there for the next 25 years. Yeah, I think that's absolutely what we see in EY ourselves, Ambassador. We're an all-island practice. We've seen a significant amount of growth in foreign direct investment in Northern Ireland and also in the Republic of Ireland. We see our Entrepreneur of the Year programme going from strength to strength with entrepreneurship, again, throughout the whole island, and the collaboration that we see also, and the ventures and the creation of jobs between entrepreneurs north and south is just terrific, especially over the last 25 years. Ambassador Johnson, I might also come back to you. And, collaboration and trust are so important today. They're critical components, we believe, of our future success. In your view, how can our business community, both north and south, work more closely together to promote that cross-border trade and investment?
So I think Martin referred to an eye test. I was thinking about another eye test, which he also referred to, the test of attracting inward investment. And Northern Ireland has made remarkable strides, one of the leading destinations in Europe for investment in software development, life sciences, healthcare, a range of inward investment, cybersecurity. And I think it's important to reflect on the fact that the deal we've done with the European Union gives the people in Northern Ireland and their businesses this fantastic opportunity to collaborate both north-south and east-west and more broadly internationally. A lot of the trade that Northern Ireland companies do is with the rest of the UK, probably more so than with the rest of the world. But we want to see it expanding to become a real global hub, particularly in some of these advanced manufacturing sectors. So I think the strength of the all-island economy, the strength of the wider UK economy and its access to markets both in the UK and in the European Union position it really well. And I think if we can get the executive up and running and get political stability allied with this fantastic economic potential, some great universities, a very highly educated workforce, and people developing their skills all the time, there's a big opportunity going forward to cement the prosperity as well as the peace.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. Can I ask you both as well a question around, you know, we've seen huge bravery around the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, especially from a political perspective. Can you talk to me a little bit about what lessons you think business leaders could actually embrace from that kind of collaboration and thinking forward about that level of bravery in today's uncertain times?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I think one of the things that marked the Good Friday Agreement, like all sort of political breakthroughs, is that individuals and parties, you take their courage in their hands and take decisions which are probably quite risky and unpopular at the time. I guess business leaders need to make different calculations. They're responsible to their shareholders and their investors. But I would say it's not a risky thing to invest in Northern Ireland because there's this fantastic potential. There's this unique framework with opportunities east, west, north and south. So I would encourage business leaders to go there and visit to see the reality of Northern Ireland. The British government's pumping in a lot of money, £600 million in its new sort of city and growth deal, another £400 million in investment in infrastructure. The Shared Island Fund is also making a big contribution. So there's tremendous investment from the governments, and there's already, I think, clearly a lot of investment from the private sector. But I would encourage business leaders to go to Northern Ireland and look at the opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's a terrific message. Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Fraser, could I ask you the same?
Yeah, well, I obviously agree with everything that Paul has said. I mean, there are lessons in leadership from the peace process, and when people talk about bravery, I think we should maybe say what we mean. So political leaders certainly put their own political fortunes on the line and did things, and John Hume probably is the greatest example, who is the architect of all we now enjoy on the island of Ireland. But John Hume and David Trimble, who won the Nobel Peace Prize, both caused their own parties, or at least took decisions which they knew would be difficult for their own parties and their own voters, but they did it because it was the right thing to do. Other political leaders who had to maybe deal with paramilitary organisations and deal with decommissioning, ending of armed activity, they also faced political risks, but they also faced risks to their own lives. In fact, most political leaders in Northern Ireland faced risks to their own lives in making these difficult decisions. So I think we should remember that. It's sometimes easy to forget. The other thing, though, and maybe for your audience, Frank, as in terms of leadership, because of course, as Paul says, it's not the same thing. Of course, business is different. But I've worked with many political leaders in Europe, in the States, in Britain, and in Ireland, and I always know the people who believed they did the right thing when they had the opportunity. They saw the opportunity and they took it. And I also know leaders who didn't, who were maybe conservative or careful, or didn't just want to take a risk or do something they knew was right, or missed an opportunity. And you can last a long time, or you can seize the moment. And it's the leaders who seize the moment, not recklessly, obviously not, but the leaders who seize the moment are the leaders who are happiest when their time is up.
Yeah, I think they're terrific messages. They're great messages about looking into Northern Ireland, seeing Northern Ireland and the island of Ireland today for what it is, but also those key messages around attributes and values, along with bravery, I think are just incredible messages. So I'd really like to thank both Ambassador Johnson and also Ambassador Fraser for joining me today in EY. Thank you also, everybody, for being with us here for this really special event. There were some fascinating insights and reflections shared by all of our distinguished guests, which I hope you found thought-provoking, and I know I certainly did. The Belfast Good Friday Agreement, well, it has left an incredible legacy of economic and social prosperity. Its signing 25 years ago, it was a pivotal moment in the history of our island of Ireland, and its impact continues to be felt right to this day. The next few weeks, well, they will be very busy, with visits by US presidents, past and present, all here to acknowledge this historic and game-changing agreement.
What happened on this island a quarter of a century ago continues to inspire others around the world to take a chance for peace. For us as business leaders, we have the responsibility to continue to drive growth and economic prosperity for all on our island of Ireland. It is a real privilege for us as leaders to actually be able to do so. We know that there are many opportunities ahead of mutual benefit, which we will continue to pursue together. So thank you. Thank you for being with us in EY today. Please keep safe, keep well, and bye for now.